We believe Jesus Christ is the hope of salvation for all, and that every man, woman, and child in the world must have a chance to hear his gospel.
We've been reaching people where they are for 75 years on the devices that they use, the one that they've already got in their pocket. If we can get God's word into the device that they're carrying in their hands, that's the only way to get it through their ears and into their heart.
Today, 4 billion people are within reach of FEBC broadcasts. Men, women, and children are listening right now in over 120 languages to programs created by a local believer. In the last 5 years alone, we've received more than 10 million responses to our gospel programs across 49 countries. In 1945, 3 men founded the Far East Broadcasting Company with an audacious goal: to preach the gospel inside China using an emerging technology called radio. But for years, they received no responses from listeners in China. Was anyone even listening? But the faith of FEBC's founders was unwavering, and by the 1970s, China opened and responses flew in, first by the thousands and then by the millions.
And now, you see the Christian communities inside China. It's so amazing.
In the 80s, FEBC made international headlines with a 300,000-person mass conversion to the Christian faith among Asia's Hmong people. In the 90s, FEBC presence was established in post-Soviet countries like Russia. In the 2000s, Mongolia had gone from 20 Christians to 40,000 in 2 decades. In the 2010s, FEBC has seen immense growth in Central Asia, with 5 new stations and millions within reach 24 hours a day in Kyrgyzstan alone.
When the Far East Broadcasting Company first started, our primary focus was China, but we saw how effective using media platforms to convey the gospel of Jesus Christ into the hearts of the people, it has spread all across the 1040 window.
Today, the potential audience is in the billions. FEBC is constantly researching what device people are using to listen, and we meet them there. Our programs are optimized for internet streaming, social media, and for mobile devices, and the response online is staggering. FEBC Russia received over 1 million responses last year online. FEBC Korea estimates last year's online audience at over 10 million listeners. Listeners in China are downloading Christian content through our apps over 13 million times a year. That's more engagement than the largest social media account in the world receives. Far beyond the urban areas where our listeners stream internet radio, there's millions who have never heard about Jesus. They are truly the hardest to reach.
ಹಾಗಾಗಿ ನಮ್ಮ ಬ್ಯಾಕ್ಗ್ರೌಂಡ್ ಕೆಲವು ಸರಿ ಕಾಡಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತಾರೆ.
We have a 300 million gods, but I never knew who is Jesus Christ.
Ternyata di dalam diri mereka itu ada sesuatu kekosongan. Tapi saya sudah menginformasikan bahwa kesananya akan ada radio atau siaran-siaran yang bisa membantu untuk pertumbuhan iman mereka.
We're constantly looking for new ways to reach the furthest forgotten areas, like in Indonesia, one of the most heavily forested regions on Earth. This is where we recently put gospel content on over 100 rural radio stations.
Because of the difficult places that FEBC is serving in, where persecution has become the norm, we see a tremendously different response from the people. I had the privilege to meet pastors of churches in Pakistan who have had bombs go off in the front. I've met with North Korean refugees who have come to South Korea and started small churches and gatherings who have personally told me about the impact that radio had in their lives.
We were strictly forbidden to use the name of Christ.
Sering Alkitab yang dia baca dirampas, dibuang, dihancurin, dilempar. Tapi Lenda saya lihat sungguh luar biasa. Dia tetap setia, masih tetap sembunyi-sembunyi baca Alkitab.
These are the stories that inspire us, that drive us, that keep us motivated toward pursuing that 75-year-old mission of proclaiming the gospel boldly to the least reached people around the earth.
Что Он так меня любит, что я Его знаю, этого Бога.
there's still so many men, women, and children who are desperate to hear about Jesus for the very first time.
ಮತ್ತೆ ಈ ಒಂದು ಫಿಬಾ ರೇಡಿಯೋ ಸುವಾರ್ತೆ ಒಂದು ವೇಳೆ ನಮ್ಗೆ ಸಿಕ್ಕದೇ ಇದ್ದಿದ್ರೆ ನಾವು ಅದನ್ನು ಹುಡುಕೊಂಡು ನಮಗೆ ಯಾರು ಬಂದು ಹೇಳ್ತಾ ಇರೋ ಗೊತ್ತಿರಲಿಲ್ಲ.
So we will press on in the remote villages, in the forgotten places, amongst the hardest to reach and the persecuted regions, until all have heard.